No, honestly, Jake, thank you so much for your time. I know it's a jam-packed media day, and I got a gazillion, or at least 15 minutes worth of questions to throw at you, okay?
Sounds good.
And I should introduce myself. I'm Cyrus from Attack the Culture, predominantly a hip-hop site, but we cover the culture, so movies, video games, all that cool stuff. So I don't want you to kind of feel like, oh my gosh, who am I talking to right now?
Right on.
Makes sense, right? Anyway, Jake, there's so many things to throw at you, as I mentioned, and the one thing that I really want to just ask you is, have you been able to exhale with July 15th, like days away finally? I know Variety loved the movie. They wrote about it back in August 2021 when it was hitting the festivals and all this stuff. And now we're finally at that point where you can unleash your baby to the world. Can you exhale yet, or not yet?
Yeah, I love exhaling. I'm an avid meditator, and that's actually the movie was born on a meditation retreat. So inhaling, exhaling has been a big part of this process for sure. It's a big milestone in the life of the film. So I'm super stoked to finally get to share it with the wider public.
No, absolutely, man. And one great thing that I love about some of these recent interviews I've done, especially with the folks over at Good Deed Entertainment, is how awesome foreign films can be, right? Of course, we're going to talk about Cambodia and all that great stuff, but just talk about personally, man, as a director, as a filmmaker, is there any extra confidence or excitement seeing the success of your peers of foreign films? And I don't just mean Parasite. I'm talking about so many films. We saw this with Roma, a Mexican film a few years back, and just in general, all that good stuff. Jake, excited?
Yeah, I mean, my love of cinema began, I was obsessed with magic tricks when I was a little kid. I loved performing magic tricks, and then I started making movies to make magic tricks. And in the very earliest days, movies were about showing magic tricks. And then that sort of evolved when I was in college and I started getting into watching. I took a class on the history of global cinema, and I got turned on to all of these amazing filmmakers from the history of cinema from all over the world. And seeing this idea of magic transformed to understanding how cinema can collapse distance between us and faraway places, but also the people that live in those faraway places. We get to be intimately invited into their lives. And that's something that's so beautiful. And so I love to travel is one of my great passions in this life, and come into contact with new people. And cinema lets you do it. You can sit at home, and then you get to be invited into the life, into the living room of someone who lives on the other side of the world. Cambodia is about as far away as you can get from Silicon Valley, where I come from. And so I love this project of collapsing distance.
No, definitely. And what's so dope, and I know it's a long-winded story, and we won't dig deep into how personal of a connection you have to this. I mean, even to the leading, the two cast members, and I know that this is part of a tribute film as well, due to a passing of one of them. But I mean, actually having taught these two children, going from teaching them to directing them, just talk about that, and specifically why you went with these two individuals.
I mean, that was the vision from the very get-go. When I talked about this film popping into my head on a meditation retreat, it happened. Everything clicked when I realized that my two favorite film students. I know as a teacher, I'm not supposed to have favorites, but these kids were they were my star pupils, and they were 10, 11 years old when I was teaching them. I spent a year teaching filmmaking in Cambodia before I had the idea for the film, and it was realizing that these two kids were the main characters. We got Lang Hang, the consummate dreamer, big open heart, super kind to everyone, but head in the clouds. And then Sreliak, she's a head shorter than everyone and is the big boss, and you don't want to cross her. It was seeing the film materialize with them in the leads, them playing some heightened version of themselves, was a part of it from the beginning. And then getting to go through that process of a long rehearsal period and then making the film with them, it was a crazy thing to do in my life, to make a sci-fi movie in Cambodia, but to have that long-standing relationship with my two lead actors, I think kept the three of us really grounded in this process where there was a lot of chaos swirling around.
Absolutely, and we want to be Attack the Culture without talking about the culture. I just love the fact that I went into Karmalink thinking, okay, this is going to be Goonies meets Stranger Things meets Black Mirror, right? And what I actually end up getting from it is a dose, or actually that's an understatement, a massive dose of amazing Cambodian culture, man. Of course, the sci-fi element is there, but I could see, you know, what you were doing, man. The family element, of course, Buddhism, the fact that, you know, nearly 95% of folks in Cambodia, you know, practice Buddhism or a form of it. There's so much of the culture of Cambodia in this film that, you know, sci-fi is there, but I just could not get enough of all that structure. Definitely talking about, of course, keeping true to your love for sci-fi, but making sure that you really spoke to the Cambodian culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the reason why I was so excited and so committed to this idea is that I haven't seen a sci-fi movie in a place like Cambodia. There's just not a whole lot of that out there. And the genre can be a little bit, I don't know, elitist or something. You think of sci-fi and you think of Silicon Valley. And so I wanted a story that felt to tell a story. I was excited. I was like, oh, I want to see a story that's dealing with sci-fi themes, but that feels like very Cambodian in its DNA. Obviously, I'm not Cambodian, and so for that, I really had to rely on my Cambodian collaborators at every step of the way to bring their culture and share it on screen. And it's something that I'm really proud of, that we were able to capture a lot of nuance and subtlety and aspects of the culture that I really love. And for me, I think coming from the West and seeing the way that family and community functions was something that I really wanted to celebrate. You know, at its heart, it's a film about relationships. It's got all this crazy sci-fi stuff, but it's about community.
No, absolutely. And you know, I want to backpedal for just 1 second, Jake. The decision to go with the 2 leading cast members and their actual names, man. I think, you know, sometimes we'll see this, you know, a form of this in films, but to go with their actual lead names, was that just kind of an ode to them, or was there a backstory behind going with them actually using their real names?
Yeah, I know. It was just, I think that it was, you know, when I told them that I had this idea, I was like, I want you guys to be yourself. You know, it's going to be a crazy sci-fi story. There's going to be augmented reality. There's going to be like artificial consciousness, but you're there just being yourselves. And I think that it was part of this desire to just give space for them to act, you know, for it to feel like very natural and low key and chill amidst all this crazy sci-fi story.
No, absolutely. And Jake, let me also ask you, just kind of sort of saying on that topic, going with the kids element, right? You know, I referenced Goonies before, I referenced Stranger Things, but I think there's an innocence that goes with, and I say kids, I know they're supposed to be teenagers as well, but, you know, you could have maybe told this with older teenagers, you know, somebody in their 20s, you know, because of that age gap with of course, the character that I'm referring to, the main one, but obviously going with the kids, again, you had that personal connection, but what was the main motivation? I love the fact that you went in that direction, but you could have went with a range of
Sure, for sure. I think that, I mean, the coming of age story is such a classic story. It's the loss of innocence and understanding how the world works. And it's a story about these kids coming to understand how the world works in terms of sort of the process of development, and how they're understanding that there's these forces that are changing their culture and their society that they're not in control of. And so it's partly wanting to tell that story. And then also I studied neuroscience, and there's this period when we're going through puberty and when we're like around 13 years old, when our brain really starts to like crystallize and we get more set in our ways. And that's, you know, we start off with like so many billions of connections, and they get pruned down to where our brain is at. And I think that there's something in kind of the scientific basis on my nerdy side that wanted to have that be a natural part of the story as well.
No, absolutely. I'll just throw a couple more things at you. I know we're running short on time, but you know, I'm just looking at some of the notes that I took while I was watching the film. You know, going back to that culture discussion, there's so many elements, whether it's directly expressed in the film, whether, you know, we're talking about the rice poppy seed, man, or even the family connection at dinner, you know, the emphasis on making sure grandma is okay, that close-knit family. But there's also little things that I think just speak to that Cambodian culture, the resiliency, right? Anybody that knows about Cambodia and just, you know, those uphill battles with the war and poverty, you don't ever make it look like it's, oh my gosh, they're trying to fight to get away from this. You know, like they embrace it. It's almost like a badge of honor. You know, I saw that. Like I said, the family. I even love the random dogs that even the dogs are like kind of just chilling in the area. But just were there any elements of that culture aspect that that you really want to own in on, or maybe that didn't even make the final cut?
Well, I love that you highlighted that. You know, I think that there's a tendency in the West when we're telling stories about a place like Cambodia, or you know, Slumdog Millionaire was a sort of like anti-inspiration. That's a story where you have a kid who's born in poverty, and you see every terrible thing imaginable happen to that kid, and then in the end he escapes and he becomes rich and he's living the individualistic dream. And that's just such a wrong-headed picture. You know, I was, as a teacher there and going into my students' homes, it's like, yeah, they have a lot of challenges related to their socioeconomic situation, but at the same time their lives are full of love and beauty, and they, you know, they take care of their homes, and like it's not every day a crisis. It's just sort of like, this is, they've built themselves like a life that is beautiful and that is under threat. The culture is under threat from these changes, and this like individualistic culture that's coming from, you know, the West, where I come from, is in the process of tearing this apart. And so I wanted to tell a story that emphasized the importance of family and culture, and that's not some sensationalized view of what this life is like, but it's actually like, oh no, they're living, you know, they're like normal, beautiful, full, rich human lives. And I hate that I would even have to say that, but I think that we get this message so drilled into our heads that like, oh, feel sorry for the people who are living in this place. And it's like, no, dude, sometimes we should just feel sorry for us, that we're like stuck in our little boxes, you know, and don't feel the same love.
Jake, I would be disrespecting other folks that want to talk to you, man. I have like 20 more questions, but honestly, I cannot thank you enough for the time and opportunity to speak with you. Congrats. I cannot wait to get this out to the masses, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the world experiencing Karmalink. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.